My aim is to keep this as simple as possible. After all, we're just talking about the modest topic of death, consciousness, and what it means to exist. Most of my life, I have been terrified by the idea of death. I believe this fear began when I was around the age of 10. I have a vivid memory of my aunt explaining to me that one day my grandfather would die. My young mind neither understood nor wanted to accept that. I didn't want my grandfather to go away, to not be here anymore, to die. My reality was shattered as I struggled to make sense of this new idea. Thus far, I had no ontological framework to support me, which left behind a deep trauma regarding death. Moreover, a society that seemed to offer little guidance on this taboo subject. Of course, my aunt didn't intend on causing me an existential crisis, but in a way, that's what happened. Nevertheless, I wouldn't change any of it. Perhaps this one event guided me on a search for knowledge and truth, discovering myself in the process, enabling me to be here now, humbly sharing this experience. Before you can better see through my eyes, allow me to ask you a series of questions so you can begin to see the path that led me where I'm at. What is the nature of information? What does it mean to communicate and interpret? How do you define language? Do you believe it is possible for a language to exist without a conscious mind to create, communicate, and interpret? And what of the language of maths and genetic information? What about laws and the laws of nature, energy, thermodynamics? Is it possible for laws to exist devoid of creators and interpreters of such laws? What is autonomy? I want to emphasize the following questions, which may seem the simplest of the bunch. What does the word nothing mean? And can you point to an example of nothing? So here we are. Is this not a primary fear regarding death, that we will cease existing somehow, disappearing into nothingness? Often we use the word nothing to refer to seemingly empty space, but is that space empty or is it full of something? If the space between you and I was nothing, it wouldn't exist. The word nothing is merely a concept, as nothing does not exist. That is in fact how the word is defined, non-existence. But colloquially, we misrepresent the word to be the temporary absence of something, amongst other uses. When something exists, it exists forever. It cannot be caused to cease existing. Something cannot become nothing. Even this phrase creates a paradox and shows misunderstanding. Indeed, you can take a stone and smash it into pieces, grind it into dust and powder, and allow it to blow away in the wind, but you haven't caused anything to cease existing. You have changed the form, the collection of parts, but all that made up the stone still exists. None of the parts magically blinked out of existence. So this leads us to a big question. What about consciousness? Can consciousness cease existing? First, before we answer that, what is consciousness? Is it something? We need to understand both what consciousness is and how it relates to other seemingly non-conscious aspects of reality. To do so, let us explore some classical perspectives. Descartes defines thought in the following way. Thought. I use this term to include everything that is within us in such a way that we are immediately aware, conscious of it. Thus, all the operations of the will, the intellect, the imagination, and the senses are thoughts. I say immediately so as to exclude the consequences of thoughts. A voluntary movement, for example, originates in a thought. Thomas Nagel's famous "what it is like" criterion aims to capture another and perhaps more subjective notion of being a conscious organism. According to Nagel, a being is conscious just if there is something that it is like to be that creature. That is, some subjective way the world seems or appears from the creature's mental or experiential point of view. In Nagel's example, bats are conscious because there is something that it is like for a bat to experience its world through its echolocatory senses. Even though we humans, from our human point of view, cannot emphatically understand what such a mode of consciousness is like from the bat's own point of view. Let's break this down further. Simply put, consciousness is awareness, where exists an active observer. Conscious awareness may vary greatly depending upon the number, quality, and type of sensory inputs, or lack thereof. All animals on Earth are conscious, which of course includes the human animal. Our senses allow specific information to be transmitted to our brain, where we process, catalog, and evaluate, cross-referencing against previous experiences and making decisions based on these data. Thus, non-conscious denotes the absence of awareness, wherein there does not exist an active observer. Perhaps we can reference a rock here, or a piece of dust, since neither seem to possess the measurable quality of conscious awareness of an active observer. However, the lack of response and unobserved mechanisms for consciousness are not sufficient evidence to determine the absolute absence of conscious awareness. A rock may simply find us too young and uninteresting to engage with. Just as an apple tree comes from the seed of an apple, a dog comes from a dog, a gorilla from a gorilla, and a human from a human. To take it a step further, imagine through genetic manipulation there exists a dog-human, which comes from the combination of both dog and human DNA. You might force any number of combinations, but something always comes from something. Something cannot come from nothing. As we know, nothing does not exist. Likewise, consciousness can only come from consciousness. You might assemble rocks, dust, and chemicals in any number of ways, but they will not spontaneously generate consciousness out of a non-conscious state. Let us look at the idea of artificial general intelligence, AGI, and please forgive my oversimplification here. We humans might string together a series of programmed responses, if this, then that, and even encode clever mechanisms for adaptation and improved responses, which may resemble an autonomous active observer, yet this is more akin to stored energy or perpetual motion than to a conscious observer. This is another generalization, but imagine you use your phone to record yourself screaming and crying. When you press the playback button, you don't imagine your phone is actually sad, but rather you recognize it is merely stored energy. Further, imagine programming your phone to monitor your heart rate and fitness activity. And if your heart rate is elevated but no physical fitness is happening, your phone automatically sends you an uplifting quote. You see here that there exists no conscious observer inside your phone who cares about your well-being, but rather stored energy, programmed to release when certain criteria determined by you are met. So what is this conscious observer? Well, if consciousness is awareness, let us imagine a single autonomous conscious observer in a void. Although the word void is not entirely accurate since it is occupied by the observer. It's difficult to conceive of or give purpose to such awareness when there is an absence of material stimuli to be aware of. Only self. It is a bit like being deaf and blind while also removing the other senses and floating in the vacuum of space. Where does one go, and what does one do with the infinite void of self? First, it is important to consider that you are without a corporeal avatar and your sensory inputs are gone. No eyes, ears, mouth, nose, or skin. You are omnipresent consciousness. You exist wherever possible. In essence, you are the one and only God. You are Aristotle's unmoved mover, the first uncaused cause. Aristotle wrote, "It is clear, then, that there is neither place nor void, nor time outside the heaven. Hence, whatever is there is of such a nature as not to occupy any place, nor does time age it, nor is there any change in any of the things which lie beyond the outermost motion. They continue through their entire duration, unalterable and unmodified, living the best and most self-sufficient of lives. From the fulfillment of the whole heaven derive the being and life which other things, some more or less articulately, but other feebly, enjoy. Regarding our corporeal existence, there is the possibility that our senses are limitations to the conscious observer rather than an enhancement. As I said before, if we were aware of everything around us all at once, it would overload us with information. Perhaps the limitation of our senses enable us as observers to see a very specific aspect of a shared reality. And once the observer sheds the corporeal shell, has the capacity for greater observation. But now, with knowing precision, developed discernment, and a focused will. Here I would like to introduce Thoth. Ancient Egyptians regarded Thoth as one, self-begotten and self-produced. He was the master of both physical and moral or divine law, making proper use of Mat. Mat represents the concepts of truth, balance, order, harmony, law, morality, and justice. Additionally, Thoth is credited with making the calculations for the establishment of the heavens, stars, earth, and everything in them. The Egyptians credited him as the author of all works of science, religion, philosophy, and magic. The Greeks further declared him the inventor of astronomy, astrology, the science of numbers, mathematics, geometry, surveying, medicine, botany, theology, civilized government, the alphabet, reading, writing, and oratory. They further claimed he was the true author of every work of every branch of knowledge, human and divine. So how do I rein in this ever-expanding subject, which goes to the very foundations of all existence? I started off by telling you a story about my fear of death, which likely stems from the fear of ceasing to exist, at least in part. Well, for me, that particular fear is gone. There is so much we don't understand, so many beautiful mysteries. We stare through a very narrow sensory window into an infinite plane of existential information, made manifest in the collective mind of the origin of consciousness. Does it all sound like scientific or religious nonsense, an absurd and ridiculous tale? Remember that we are walking, talking, pondering sacks of water, constructed of tiny spherical atoms molecularly programmed by a genetic language comparable to an advanced technology, all while we're floating on a giant water-covered rock, drifting through the vacuum of space and spinning around a fiery ball of gas. As for me, I humble myself and embrace love, truth, and compassion for all sentient beings. I am eliminating my hypocrisies and treating all as I wish to be treated. However, like you, I am still in this corporeal form, experiencing reality through my senses and doing my best each day to brighten my light and share love with those around me. In any case, as Sigmund Freud said, the goal of all life is death. And from Arthur Schopenhauer, after your death, you will be what you were before your birth. Thank you for consciously observing here with me. If you feel inclined to do so, please like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. If there's a particular topic you would like me to cover, let me know, and if I feel I can shed light, I will give it my humble best. Thank you.